So I have been psychic my entire life, and I never like to talk about being psychic because it was something that I've had to figure out a lot on my own. I didn't really have any guidance in this area, much like my emotional life. And also, I just feel like talking about it is, I just don't like to cross the worlds of like psychology and spirituality. Even though there are a lot of interconnections in those two worlds, I don't like to because I just feel like it can seem to be a bit irresponsible. And also, it's just something that I am new to accepting. Um, but I want to kind of go into like my background about it. I remember being a kid, and like my parents didn't really force us to go to church, but we did go on certain holidays like Easter, Christmas, certain stuff like that, and there were just a few weekends that we went out of the year. But yeah, it wasn't really like a super consistent thing, but it was introduced to me. And church was always very, I just never really felt connected to church. And one thing I did notice, just from me looking back at my life, I've noticed that when I was in church and the pastor would say, turn to your neighbor and say, or whatever, or turn to your neighbor and hug them, I hated that so much. I hated it so much because I just, even as a kid, I was extremely sensitive to people. And if you were outside of my family and I didn't fuck with you, like if I didn't know you, I was very like about your energy, even if I was able to, still push through it. But church was just one of those things I could never push through. I used to be like, oh my gosh, please don't tell us to turn to our neighbor. Please don't tell us, because I don't want to turn to nobody right now. Um, So yeah, I would turn to my daddy and that's it. But I always hated that part of it. And I also remember my great grandma, my granny. Me and my cousin spent a lot of time with her. And when she was alive, she would always, our family members used to get mad at us because we would giggle all the time. We was always giggling and laughing. And I remember one time, she told us, she was like, you know what? If the worst of it is that y'all laugh too much, I'm cool with that. She was like, child, y'all ain't hurting nobody. I'm okay with my girls laughing. Um, and I remember when she passed away, before she passed away, she came to visit us in North Carolina, and she sat in our upstairs back room, in this chair, and she did her crocheting and she watched her stories on the TV that was back there. And that was my granny routine. But when she came to visit us, she did that in that back room. And I remember when she passed away, uh, I didn't go to that back room for like a really long time. I did not go back there. And I'm not saying that she was in the house. I'm not saying that. But I just know that I felt a presence back there when she passed away. And I didn't go back there. And I honestly do feel like in my heart of hearts, not to get up too woo woo, I feel like my granny was at our house with my mom because my mom took her death really hard. And I don't feel like she was able to really process, that very well. And I do feel like her presence was there to kind of guide my mom through that. Because it took a while for me to go back there. But anyway, and then I also remember when I graduated basic training, I had a dream um, about my granny. And she came to me and she was like, I remember the dream like it was yesterday. I was in my room. Somebody was wheelchairing her by and taking her to her room. And she was like, I see you and your cousin ain't stopped that laughing yet. And that's how I knew it was her in my dream. And then she looked over and said, but I'm very proud of you. And that was like the day before that was literally the day before I graduated my basic training to go to the army. Anyway, fast forward, uh my grandparents passed away And I remember, I tell this story a lot. I remember being at my grandfather's funeral and being like, okay, well, that people talk about their stories, or whatever, and it all clicked to me. And I was downloading all of this into my psyche at like 21 years old. And I remember when my grandpa, they were telling the stories about him, and I remember just downloading all of that information into my blood and being like, you know what? This is so crazy because I feel like his blood literally runs through me, him and my grandmother. I don't really remember my grandmother's um, funeral too much, but I do know that I missed her, and I know that I'll get to that. Anyway, so after that, that was like a thing. Um, and I don't know, I feel like when it comes to death, I process it very differently because I feel like if I was close to you in life, I'm gonna always be close to you. And I feel like even with my grandparents, I feel like they're always with me. Like they protect me. My grandparents and my great grandmother, they protect me. They are always with me, and I can just recall so many situations in life where things should have gone one way, but they completely went another way, and I know that it's because they are with me. Um, and they look out for me. And I value education, and I just know that I get that from my grandparents, and they store so many values within me, and I just know that they always with me. So that's one thing, and it's like I don't. Whenever people pass away, it's not that I really grieve for the person that's passing. It's more so that I grieve for the people that don't know how to process death. But for me, death just feels like it's a part of life. And I just know that once people who I was close to cross over, they're with me forever. And even when I get dressed and leave out the house, and I make sure I look decent before I leave the house, that's something that my great grandmother taught me. And just always looking sharp, looking your best, baby. She never played, so I always am making sure that I'm looking decent when I leave the house. And I'm looking my best whenever I'm going places that I want to look my best at. And I just know that she's always with me in everything that I do, as well as my grandparents. And then, even ever since my aunt passed away, I can see certain situations where it's still very fresh. So it's a lot of things that I can look around and see that is clearly her helping me out on my path. So I've always felt that way about death. I've always felt that way about religion and the church, and I've always been quite psychic. Just being around people and being just I just understand that I don't process the world um in a physical way. Like, yes, I see things and I hear things happening and I can smell what I smell, but I can always see into a different realm when I'm processing these things physically. Um, and I've always been that way, and I kind of want to start speaking that over my life because I think that I've been so afraid to acknowledge it so much because I feel like the worlds intersect so much that you can look psychotic and manic when that is actually not what's going on. So I will always talk about keeping myself grounded and understand that me being planted and seated and rooted in the ground is important for me to actually access my psychic abilities and to be accurate when I am assessing and observing situations and people, um, and following my intuition. I know that's the basis for it. So yeah, I've always been quite psychic. I just never really had the tools in this life to be able to navigate that, and I am grateful to have done that in my life and keep my humanism, the fact that I'm a human first, because that is what's going to allow me to tap into my other gifts, because that's the main gift, is that I'm a human being and I'm breathing and I'm living and I'm healthy, and I'm grounded and I'm at peace. So yeah, so I hope that this made sense. Comment down below if y'all have any more questions.